everything is a choice. But what I'm saying is, if you are too afraid to look at the things that I'm asking you to look at, that's okay today. But I want you to know that on the day it hurts worse to have your symptom, there's another way to look at it.
I gotta get myself a little more faith, a little more love.
I'm your host, Christa Bigler, and I'm going to guess we have at least one thing in common, that we're both in pursuit of a less stressed life. On this show, I'll be interviewing experts and sharing clinical pearls from my years of practice to support high-performing, health-savvy women in pursuit of abundance and a less stressed life. One of my beliefs is that we always have options for getting the results we want, so let's see what's out there together.
All right. Today on The Less Stressed Life, I have Nicole Sachs, who's a psychotherapist, author, speaker, and founder of The Cure for Chronic Pain, a global platform helping people heal from chronic pain and anxiety without medication or surgery. A direct student of Dr. John Sarno, Nicole developed the JournalSpeak method and has worked with thousands through her books, courses like Freedom from Chronic Pain and Freedom from an Anxious Life, podcasts, retreats, and practitioner training programs. She teaches annually at the Omega Institute and continues to inspire a worldwide audience to reclaim their health through emotional expression and mind-body healing. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So last month I was at an event for business owners, and there was another person who's a very similar type of colleague to myself. And she did a lot of health blogging, and we were going through the lunch line, and she just really wanted to talk about your work, about chronic pain, and how she was feeling a little disillusioned in her current work because she had this back pain. And she read your book and she resolved her back pain. And she's, I just feel really excited about the nervous system and all these things. And that was fun because that is something I've had Dr. David Hanscom on the show a couple times. Sometimes I'm surprised. Do you know him? Okay, cool.
Of course, yeah.
I figured you did. Just excited to have another angle or you on the show. And on the way home from that event, I started your audiobooks. I made it halfway through that. And I love how you're a little bit spicy. So I want you to share a little bit. Let's open up. That's the story of how you arrived here. You jumped on the schedule right away. So I was thankful for that, just because it's so great to get this out there. But tell us about your story first and how you got into this work. You offer a little bit. I do see that Dr. Sarno was also he was maybe in the same general realm of medicine. Dr. Hanscom is actually no longer a back surgeon, but a former back surgeon, and you're a psychotherapist. And I'd love to hear all the pieces of the story about how you arrived at where you are now, essentially.
Yes. So it starts, as many of us do, in the world of healing and wellness, which is I came in as a patient of it. I was 19 when at college my back went out so completely that I couldn't walk. My parents brought me home and I underwent all the tests. And I still believe in the medical model and being tested. So I am not saying that people shouldn't go to the doctor. But when I went to the doctor, I was diagnosed with something called degenerative spondylolisthesis, which is a pretty significant, in my case, abnormality of the lower spine. And of course, it makes complete sense that all the doctors figured that was the reason for my tremendous back pain. So in my orthopedic surgery consult, they suggested that spinal fusion surgery would be the eventual thing that I would probably be presented with. Having said that, at 19, they were like, you don't need to do this now. All you have to do is stop your travel, stop your exercise, stop sleeping in certain positions, no more riding in the car for more than an hour because of the destabilization, and the likelihood that you'll have biological children is slim to none because of the weight of the baby on the back. So just those small adjustments. So
good luck.
Yeah, joy, peace. And I'm not saying that they were at all flippant about it, but it was really just the most shocking and life-altering diagnosis that you could imagine for someone that young. And so essentially with enough steroids and muscle relaxers and Tylenol 3 with codeine, it was like 1990. Thank God it wasn't stronger opioids. I was able to move from acute pain to chronic pain, meaning I was able to walk. I was able to return to college with a handicap thing on my car, drive to my classes. Like, it was a different life. It was a different situation, but it was what I was given. Yet still there was an inkling in me, a curiosity that I couldn't place, where maybe this wasn't the end to my story. I was like just too young. And like you say, I'm a little spicy, like too rebellious, I think, in my mind to be like, this is done and done. So as I went through my life, I was now in graduate school, and my mother came across through watching the Rosie O'Donnell show on TV, all these kind of hilarious synergies.
Culture.
Like hilarious synergies of life. And Jeanette Barber, one of Rosie's producers, had been in a motorized wheelchair, and my mom was watching the follow-up episode where Jeanette was running the New York Marathon. And they were like, what changed for Jeanette? And the answer was Dr. John Sarno. And so I started looking into mind-body medicine. I started looking into his work. I started understanding that the premise was not that the pain was in my head or that I was making it up or being hysterical or sensitive in any way. My pain was real and excruciating. But through the lens of mind-body medicine and the brain science behind why we feel anything at all, the theory was that when your nervous system is dysregulated and when your body is in fight or flight and continues to be so, the pain signals that end up getting sent to your body are sent as a means of protection and distraction, because pain slows us down and it allows us to take care of ourselves. So just through understanding Sarno's theories, I was able to just have like a toe in the door, a pinprick of light, something that said, maybe it isn't that you are inextricably damaged and this is the fate. My story is long and we have so much to talk about. I'm not going to get into the details and the minutia of it. It's all in the new book, Mind Your Body. But the point is that I found this work and I was able to rewrite not only my own neural pathways through doing the work, but my conception of the way the body functions and how much more complicated it is than it might present itself to be. And I moved through my education. I became a licensed psychotherapist. And then through eventually meeting with Dr. Sarno and learning through him what this nervous system regulation is about, what it is to have an emotional stimuli cause a physical reaction. I learned this, created the tools I created, and then I ended up just making it my life's work to teach it and to help people all over the world. And it is astonishing what happens when people understand the power that they have, first of all, to affect their physical and emotional health, because we are such a disempowered society when it comes to physical healing. And then to know that they can do the work, it's pretty amazing how people change.
Yeah. I have a quick question about your journey. Were you already on the route to becoming a psychotherapist? I know this work changed the trajectory of your life, but were you already en route to that field?
I was a psych major in college. I certainly knew that I wanted to pursue something in the field of psychology, but by going through this myself, it crystallized the route and the specialty that I wanted to do.
Cool. All right. So you just opened up that can of when you have a dysregulated nervous system, how is the body reading that? Can you walk us a little bit more through the mechanism of how repressed emotions manifest as physical symptoms? And I think you brought up a good point that I didn't bring into my notes, was that your pain is real. It's not in your head. And if we accidentally misconstrue that very important point at the beginning, then all the rest, nothing else gets trusted. Yeah, exactly.
All is lost. It's really funny. Just a quick note. So when my book launched in February, I was invited to come on to the Today Show, which is a terrifying experience because it's live TV and you get 4 minutes. And I remember as I was preparing for it, I said, no matter what I am asked, I'm like a politician. The first response to any question is, the pain is not in your head. You are not creating it. You are not at fault for it. You are not overly sensitive, hysterical. Like, immediately, I must say, but the solution is not in altering your physical body. And I will help you to understand that. But you're right, Christa. The doorway through which is always to make people understand you are experiencing pain so excruciating potentially, or stomach issues destabilizing, or migraine so blinding, or long COVID so fatiguing, or all these things that you're experiencing are so extreme that you might not be able to function in life. My parents had to carry me physically. I did not walk on my own feet when I left college that day. And it was humiliating and it was terrifying. You're right. The number one thing people can hear, so that they are invited to identify in, not identify out of what I'm teaching.
For sure.
Yeah. So having said that, here's a little kind of just a tiny bit of a lesson on the brain science. There are certain functions of the human body that are unconscious, things that we all celebrate that we don't have to control, meaning heartbeat, circulation, respiration, things that are happening unconsciously in your body every day that you never think about, and it is part of the functioning of the reflexive systems of the human. There is another one that people don't often think about, and that is the protective function of our fight or flight response. So I like to tell the story of I was in London when I was in my 20s, and I was all having fun and distracted with my friends, and I stepped out to cross the street. I looked to see if the traffic was coming, and I stepped out to cross the street. And by the time I jumped onto the curb and felt the double-decker bus whiz past my face so close, I truly almost felt like my nose touched it. I had no memory of jumping back on the curb because obviously as an American, I looked the wrong way of incoming traffic. And so what I like to tell people is your brain and your nervous system operate with cat-like reflexes and protect you without asking your permission or your opinion. You remove your hand from a hot stove, you haven't thought about it. It's like that. It's in an instant. So the same exact unconscious effects that your circulation, respiration, heart rate are having on your body, so is this fight or flight response. Okay, so take that and put it on the side burner. We are human. We are here to feel big. We have relationships. We have relationships that go back to childhood, and then we have our day-to-day relationships, and then we have a relationship with our personality. The hardest and harshest voice, the inner critic, the perfectionist, the goodist, the codependent, the one who is always holding yourself to an impossible standard. So these are all relationships with self, with current people, and with our memories from upbringing and all that stuff. And they live inside of us in what I like to call the emotional reservoir. It's under the cover of darkness. We are not thinking about these things on a moment-to-moment basis in the same way we're not thinking about getting our heart to beat, but they're there. When that emotional reservoir threatens to overflow, when it's just one too many things, or in the case of long COVID, where it's a global pandemic, where we all go into fight or flight at the same time, whatever it be, your nervous system will make that decision. That is the pulling the hand from the hot stove. That is the jumping out of the moving traffic. It does not give you a sense of what's happening, but what it does is it scans the landscape. It sees a predator, and in this case, the predator is your overflowing reservoir where you can't take one more thing. And then it decides to protect you without your permission. So what happens is if you have a proclivity for migraines, maybe your mother got migraines and you grew up watching her in bed, or since you were 10 years old, you had one incident, that's a neural pathway that has been already tread. When you are in a state where the reservoir is overflowing, and let's say you are scheduled to go on a work trip, and that work trip will put you in the position with people that are, at least in your perception, judging you or holding you to a standard you're not sure if you could fulfill, or you're struggling with your body image and you don't know if you can wear the clothes you need to wear, or you're feeling guilty because that means you have to leave your kids, right? All of these are potentially huge factors. The reservoir overflows, the nervous system senses a predator, so it sends protection. You get a terrible migraine. It's not your fault. You're sick. You call in and you cancel the thing that's going to put you in place of a predator. And what I like to say in my work is I call this safe in the unsafest way. Sure, your systems, your primitive systems think you're safe, but you're missing your life. And I teach people to put a ladle in the reservoir and to dump it down. I teach them the mindset management tools. I educate them on the brain science. I teach them that self-compassion is literally a verb. And if we do not know how to do it, we will be overflowing ourselves unnecessarily for a lifetime. And with those facets, I help people literally rewrite their brain. I watch people do what I've done for myself, which is go from disability to running marathons and living their lives and having children and getting married. And it's astonishing what we can do if we know we have the power.
And although you focus on chronic pain and anxiety, as you're speaking, I've had lots of people talk about this topic from different angles, not exactly the same, right? But how does emotion get stored in the body and how does it manifest? And it can manifest in autoimmunity and pretty much every other symptom possible, right?
Yes.
I'll never forget how I had a lovely client. She was also a therapist, and we got into she loved coming to breathwork sessions. And she said, my nose just stops running after years of running when I'm doing this breath work. And it's like we learn the most through the experience. And so we can be a little skeptical probably before. I'm sure you wade through rivers of skepticism a lot in your daily work. And it's
yes, ma'am.
A little bit of a challenge. And another thing, and maybe we don't need to highlight this too much, but you're describing this very tangible daily experience of how this reservoir gets more and more full. And the challenge to me becomes that becomes the normal, right? To where it becomes unconscious. And so for a very long time, I've been a little bit obsessed with the concept of unconscious stress, which I think is similar to what you're interested in too, right? Unconscious stress might look like pain. It might look like anxiety. It might look like everything else, right? And on this exact note, you say in your book and other places, you need to feel it to heal it. And so as we deal with this longer and longer, sometimes something that happens is we become a little bit emotionally hard or we like to avoid emotions. What feedback, what advice might you say to someone who says, I can't feel anything, or someone that's been avoiding emotions for decades? Where do they start? What do they do?
You know, what I like to tell people is your nervous system, and I know that we're like personifying it, but it's actually helpful conceptually to do, has the mentality of, let's call it a rescue puppy or kitten that you've brought back from the shelter, okay? It is going to take time and it's going to take safety for it to be convinced by you, who it thinks doesn't know what's going on, that it doesn't have to go into these moment-to-moment protective measures. And so the reason I liken it to a rescue puppy or a dog that you bring home is you might bring home that rescue dog and you are full of love and light and all you want to do is hug it and have it in your bed and whatever. And all of a sudden it goes under the bed. Why does it go under the bed? Because previously it's been made to feel that it's been unsafe and dangerous. So if people say to me, I can't feel anything, I say, that is totally normal. You have gone into freeze. You've gone into a place where it is not safe for you to feel. So what would you do with that dog that comes home after abuse or after years of feeling like there was no safety? And I know what to do. It's consistency, it's patience, and it is confidence. So you sit on the floor and you have the treat in your hand. Are you going to go and drag that dog out from under the bed? Not likely that it would work. But if you sit with the treat in your hand, on the first day, maybe nothing happens. On the first however many days, depending on the level of trauma and the years of freeze, maybe nothing happens. But little by slowly, that dog is going to come out and sniff your hand and run away. And that dog is going to come out and grab the treat out of your hand and run away. But I promise you it won't be long. With patience and consistency and confidence, that dog is going to take that treat and then get in your lap. And then get in your bed and get in your heart and get in your life. And then it doesn't change. Once you rewrite the neural pathways and you learn how to drop into your experiences and you learn that you're finally, potentially at long last, safe with you after maybe you have been made to feel unsafe by the adults in your life as a child or by the relationships, there is a self-to-self relationship that is built through doing this work that no one can take away from you. And that is what I say to people, which is, this is a new paradigm. Ground yourself in the fact that breathe, hold your body with your hands. Know that this is going to maybe take a minute, but you have the power to rewrite this story and your actual neural pathways.
Yeah. So let's talk about whether you can rewrite neural pathways through types of writing exercises, or maybe you can introduce us to JournalSpeak.
Yes. So one thing I say about rewriting our neural pathways, one of my favorite meditation teachers is Sam Harris. I don't know if you know of his work, but I'm a huge fan. And what he says when he talks about meditation is, it's funny when people say meditation rewrites your neural pathways, because everything rewrites your neural pathways. Our brain is plastic. We are learning and growing and changing until the day that we die. And so there is always room for making space and for, let's call it, improving the way it feels to live in this body and in this world. So having said that, what happens when you practice JournalSpeak is that there are 3 facets of my work: believe, do the work, and patience and kindness for yourself. Under the umbrella of believe is simply what you said at the beginning of this conversation. You need to know you're safe. You need to know that this is based in science, that this is not some weird new age kind of concept. And so the first third of my book, I am teaching brain science. I am linking to studies. I am teaching you mindset. I'm telling you stories of people who have completely moved beyond their skepticism so you can invite yourself into the process. So that's believe. And then under the umbrella of do the work, I created a tool throughout my own recovery called JournalSpeak. And essentially, if we are going with the theory that we are being essentially paralyzed in anxiety, pain, and symptoms from this overflowing emotional reservoir, we simply need a vehicle with which to bring it down. So when I was doing my own journey through chronic pain, one of the things that Dr. Sarno told me is, one of the easiest ways to figure out what's in your reservoir is to journal. And I was like, okay, so you're telling me my crippling back pain is going to be alleviated because I journal? Like, I truly was the biggest skeptic, the most otherwise person. So I always say, don't worry if you are. I was. Like, I understand that. And so I thought that was like really ridiculous and too light and too easy to be true. So I started journaling, and I remember it felt like a whole lot of nothing. It felt like I was playing my tapes. I was like, woe is me, my childhood, my overcritical father, my overwhelm with having little kids. I was just spilling out what I already knew. And as I just so happens that as I was writing about the topic of motherhood, and I was writing all the things that were true on the surface. I'm really tired. I have 2 babies in diapers. I have 2 babies in cribs. I got pregnant with my second sooner than I expected. I'm overwhelmed. My husband at the time works all the time. I feel alone, right? So these are all very normal things, and they were true. But I'm writing this, and I'm like, this can't be what I'm looking. This can't be the dark stuff in my reservoir. And I remember having a moment that I definitely have to label a spiritual experience because it was so not from here. Like, it wasn't just in like my head. It felt bigger. And a line came into my mind, and I felt like it was too horrible to say. And then I felt like it couldn't possibly be true. But it didn't matter to me. I decided to replace my fear with curiosity and just freaking go. And I wrote the first line of JournalSpeak ever penned, which is, I hate being a mother. I hate this. I'm failing at it. I'm doing it wrong. My children aren't the children I ordered up. They look different and they act different. And it was the most immature, hysterical, unthinkable rant. And I don't know what came over me. I just let myself do it. And when I started to realize, as I let it out, and it started flowing out of me, is it really quickly morphed. And so first of all, I was like, wait a second, I don't hate these children, but where's this hate coming from? Where's the hate? I had a very rageaholic father who took up all the space in our house for anger. And so my mother and I'm an only child, were very sort of people-pleasy and not quiet. I'm not quiet, never have been, but soft and wanting to fix and wanting to be the solution. And I had rage inside of me that I had no connection with. And I started to rage. I started to rage on the page at my parents, at their bad mistakes, and at my own personality that formed from being so at the will of their decisions and the life I had to lead. And then the JournalSpeak turned in on me. And I was like, all the self-loathing started to come out. What a failure you are. It was wild. It was a wild ride. But what happened was, as I was working through this, I arrived at something in a million years I never would have known is true. And it was really a moment of compassion for myself. And it was a realization that when I was young, let's call it 10, 12 years old, I made this very quiet pact with myself. And it was, these people, these parents of mine, they're a mess. They're never going to take you where you need to go. But one day, if you study hard, if you're a good girl, you're going to get out of these people's houses. You're going to get into your own. and you're going to be the perfect mother, and you are going to have the perfect family, and it is going to heal the wounds of this little girl. And I had no idea that was going on for me. And it landed like such a bomb of truth in me that I felt like I was failing, and I hated parenting because I was trying to fix the wounds of a 10-year-old who was suffering. And spoiler alert, for those of you who are not yet parents, that's not the way it works. You don't make the perfect life and erase your past. You live in what is. And oh my goodness, did I realize what I had been doing unconsciously to myself. And I cried and I ripped it up and threw it away. I was like, this is a rant I never want to look at again. And I woke up the next morning and my back pain was 80% gone, never to return. And I was like, okay, I'm onto something here. And then I just called it JournalSpeak in my head. I didn't share it with anyone else. And I just went ham on all the topics in my life, on my body image, on my relationship, on my friendships, on my money issues, like blah, blah, blah. And over the next, and I don't ever give it a timeline because everyone truly is different. I called Dr. Sarno and I said, you're never going to believe it. And he's, try me. And I said, my back pain of a lifetime is gone. I am free. I haven't had back pain. I don't understand what's going on. This is what happens. He said, you got to where you needed to get the emotional reservoir down. Your nervous system is not switching into fight or flight and sending the pain signals. That is the way it works. You've regulated yourself. And I was like, hot damn, I want to share this with the world. And he started inviting me to NYU, and I would come and lecture with him and share my insights, my journey. And that was over several years. And I was at that point licensed as a psychotherapist, and he started referring clients into my practice. And I built it from there. I wrote my first book in 2012. I rewrote the whole thing for a second edition. It's called The Meaning of Truth in 2016. Started my podcast, The Cure for Chronic Pain, on my YouTube channel. And so much has transpired since then. And Mind Your Body, which I wrote this past year, is the culmination of 20 years of best practices. So the book that you're reading right now is the proudest thing I've ever done in my life because it shows you exactly how to heal yourself. And that's what I want for the world.
I was like, we could just end right there. So beautiful. Very slam dunk for sure. I want to ask you some questions that were coming up for me as you were going through this. It would be so easy to get frustrated. And I think there's probably like a little bit of stubbornness in this, right? Where it's, do we sometimes do what Dr. Sarno says, like out of, I don't know that this is going to work, but either I'm stubborn or I don't know what else I'm going to do or whatnot. I wonder how long you journaled before you landed on unpacking what really needed to be seen or spoke into the world. And how does JournalSpeak differ from what maybe Dr. Sarno was, some of his guidance for you also?
Dr. Sarno and I were super close. And I guess he was in his late 70s by the time I met him, and then through his 80s. And he died when he was the day before his 94th birthday. He did this for a long time. And he used to say to me, I'm the doctor. I can tell people medical stuff. But you explain it better than me. He used to tell me, push me in front of him on the stage, because it's really medically based psychological work. So the word psychological can be a deterrent because people then think you're saying the pain is in your head.
Yeah.
But all it means is that, okay, so I spoke at a conference last week, and this is how I opened it. Raise your hand if you've ever had a stressful day and gotten a headache. Okay, almost every hand in the room goes up. Almost everyone's had an overwhelming or just been too much and gotten a headache. And I say, okay, keep your hand up if you ran to the emergency room for a CT scan because you thought you had a brain tumor. And everybody laughs and puts their hand down. And I say, what I'm teaching you, you already believe. You already know that emotional stimuli cause physical reactions. People know that stress causes a headache. People know that if you panic, you can break out into hives. People know that when you get bad news, you lose your appetite. Everybody believes that your emotional state, your psychology, affects the way your physical body responds. And I always make a joke and I'm like, what happens when you're really moved or when you're really sad? What happens? And everyone's looking around. I'm like, water falls out of your face. An emotional thing happens to you and a physical reaction of tears, like we know. But when anything becomes chronic, the emotional and psychological connection to our physical body is thrown out the door because chronic pain is an epidemic of fear and meaning. because we are desperate now to not make our future this dark fear of, I'm not going to be able to walk. I'm not going to be able to eat the food I want. I'm not going to be able to get to my kid's recital or game. I'm not going to be able to fulfill myself in my career because of my IBS, my migraines, my fibromyalgia, my fatigue, my skin disorder. So many things, my flares of autoimmune disease are connected to what I already know that you know is true. My prescription is knowledge. JournalSpeak is a tool. People journal speak, and when they finally just give up and stop wanting to be other than they are and stop wanting for an easier solution, we are a take-a-pill society, and we are not to be blamed for that. We have been told by every structure in our society that there's a fix for that. Get this, take this pill, get this procedure, get this surgery, and unfortunately, that is definitely not true. And I'm not saying pills can't help and surgeries can't help and procedures can't help. But if the root of chronic conditions is in this dysregulation and this chronic fight or flight, which I know is the capital T truth, you aren't going to be able to circumvent that. You can't keep your hand on a hot stove. Maybe some people, if they practice, but like, it's not exactly desirable. So your body is going to take care of you in that way. So when I talk about JournalSpeak, what I say is the first ingredient in the recipe must be your buy-in. You listen, I will teach you. I will teach you from my heart. I will teach you with hundreds of interviews on my podcast that I started in 2018. So there's hundreds of episodes. You will hear from people with every symptom. You will hear from people with every walk of life, gender, socioeconomic place on the planet. And you will hear them say exactly what you think, which is, this is impossible. It'll never work for me. This is crazy. Don't tell me the pain is in my head. They say all the things because everyone starts in the same place. You will hear me teach them. And then you will hear them tearfully thank God for the pain because they are so grateful that it opened them to healing themselves. It's incredible. So there is no timeline for JournalSpeak. And there is no one way to expect it to go, but there is a recipe to do it. And I teach it. I teach it on so many platforms. And as you said in the opening, for people who want to really be handheld, I have courses, I have memberships where I teach people in myself. So there's so many ways to take this and learn it. But once you do and you practice the tool, I liken JournalSpeak to going to the gym. So it's like if you had no idea, okay, this is like we'll play a little fantasy game. Let's say you had no idea that you had any power to change your body. You didn't know that human beings could lose weight or build muscle. You had no idea. So I come to you and I go, oh my God, I have such great news for you. You're not stuck here. You actually have the power. You can exercise. You can change the way you eat. You can change the way you live. And you can change your body. And let's say that person was like, that's nuts. But then they believe me. Now I took them to the gym and I say, this is a gym. These are things that people do to exercise. Here is a personal trainer. This trainer, whether it be a course or me or a book, is going to teach you how to use this gym. Great news. You have the power and there are instructions on how to do this. If you go to that gym and you watch people work out every day for the rest of your life, your body will never change. You have to do the work. JournalSpeak is the work. I teach you how to do it. People will have all sorts of circuitous routes to getting to willingness, to getting over their resistance. I write about that too. But when you get there and you just surrender and you show up every day and you do your JournalSpeak and you rip it up and throw it away, this is like blowing your nose into a tissue. This goes all over the place and it doesn't stay true. So just do the work. Do you think I hate being a mother? My goodness. Those little babies that I wrote about all those years ago are 22, 20, and 17. And I could cry. They are the lights of my life. They're also the biggest pains in the asses. They're everything that children are. But it is a delight to know them because I have not raised them through the lens of my dysfunction. I have not raised them through the lens of meeting my needs, through making them be other than they are, because I did this work when they were just babies. And hating being a mother was the portal, but it never stayed true. But we need to go through those inconvenient portals, those unspeakable portals to get to who's really hurting inside, who really hates. A little girl who's terrified of her father screaming at her mother, so she's not going to hate. she's going to be a good girl. And these are things, when we learn them, they set us free.
Yeah. So beautiful. So many conclusion points. I want to ask you a few more questions to help people get started on this process. So one thing that might come up is that some people think that bringing up old, ugly stuff will make things worse. How do you speak to that fear?
Yes, that is a very common one. So here's what I will say. If a tree falls in the forest and there is no one there to witness it, it still makes a sound. It makes a sound. Maybe it's the squirrel that is going to hear it, but it makes a sound. And what I like to say is your darkest rooms, your hardest moments, your places that you don't want to look at are trees falling in the forest of your life and your consciousness every day. And if you're not willing to hear it, that's fine. That's your choice, but they're going to resonate somewhere through your headaches, through your back pain, through your stomach, through your autoimmune, through your migraines, blah, 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 right? You have a choice. And the celebration of this moment for you, maybe for you listening, is you have a choice. And I didn't know I had a choice until I learned that I had a choice. And that is what my primary purpose is in life, to lay this teaching at their feet and to say, you actually have a choice as to whether or not you want to live at the whim of that falling tree deciding where you're going to feel it, or you get to choose to feel it yourself. Yeah, I agree. One of my great commonly quoted lines in my work, a Nicole-ism, as they say, is life is a choice between what hurts and what hurts worse. Mm-hmm. And people always laugh and they're like, super negative, Nicole. And I'm like, no, super relieving, because you already knew that. You already knew that every choice we make in life, whether it's whether to eat that donut or whether to have that child and everything in between, is going to have consequences that hurt and is going to have joys that make it worthwhile. But everything in life is a choice between what hurts and what hurts worse. And if it hurts worse to feel the dark things that you don't want to feel, that's okay. You can have your migraine today. You can choose it. And there are days when I do. There are days where one of my symptom imperatives is headaches. I don't get them chronically. I don't get anything chronically. But once in a while, when I'm really in a place and I'm really pushed beyond my means, I will get a headache. And I will know that I have a choice. I could really pause my day and go do my JournalSpeak and meditate and whatever. Or I could say, screw it. I actually just need to get through this stuff. I'm going to take a couple Advil. I'm going to hope they take the edge off. I'm going to get through this day. I'm going to go to sleep. I'm going to be fine. Everything is a choice. But what I'm saying is, if you are too afraid to look at the things that I'm asking you to look at, that's okay today. But I want you to know that on the day it hurts worse to have your symptom, there's another way to look at it.
Yeah. You do a great job storytelling in your book to provide proof for belief. Would you share one or two stories? You shared your own already. I know you talk about your daughter's story in your book. You talk about lots of different people. That one really struck me. I don't know. That one I just took to my heart, because every time my children say something, I'm like, would you like me to teach you this thing? Would you share one or two stories that have been, I'm sure you love all of the stories, but will you share a couple that will help people get on this wagon?
I didn't know you were going to ask me this, but it's such a delight. I'm thrilled to answer this question. So the story at the end of chapter 1 is Lika's story. Now, Lika is a woman. I think when she first came upon my work, she was in her early 30s. She got COVID the first couple weeks of the epidemic, and everyone can imagine how terrifying that was. I remember listening to the reports coming out of Italy and then New York City and thinking, oh my goodness, the terror and the panic of getting this virus that nobody knows where it's going to go. It could be asymptomatic or it could kill you or anything in between.
No.
So she got COVID. She lives in the Netherlands. I never met her. She was mildly sick with COVID. She had COVID, not terrible, not having to go to the hospital. And then a few weeks later, she started getting severe symptoms that are now labeled as long COVID. Severe chest pain, constriction, crushing fatigue, terrible headaches. Just her entire body felt so ill. But because it was so early in the pandemic, she was not even allowed to walk outside and nobody could help her, and she was alone. She went from being a world traveler. Her job is that she is a travel journalist and blogger. and she wrote books, and she was like completely, obviously confined to her home, but confined to her body. It's a very dark story. She thought she was going to die. She couldn't even bathe herself for months. She had to bathe herself with a washcloth in her bed, like really serious. She couldn't walk from she couldn't put a bra on because it was too constricting. She couldn't walk from her bedroom to her kitchen without having to like really rest. So this is a person, severe symptoms. This is why I love this story, and I love the next story I'm going to tell you, because it's the magic of human connection and of a global community that, to me, it like brings tears to my eyes every time. She was listening to a Dutch podcast, and a woman being interviewed, once again, a person I've never met, was discussing my work for her back pain. And she was saying my work cured her back pain. And then she was saying it all had to do with nervous system dysregulation. And Lika remembered that one of the doctors that had been trying to help her through this months and months of long COVID had said something that her nervous system was stuck in fight or flight, but no one knew how to reverse that. So Lika listened to this podcast, and she was willing, which is always my hope, just be willing to open your mind just a little bit more than it had been open. She looked me up. She took my online course. She started doing the JournalSpeak work. She started uncovering what was keeping her in fight or flight. Over the next few months, she started getting better and better. She was able to take a walk around the block. She was able to ride her bike around her beloved Amsterdam and the canals and the beauty of it. And she found herself totally symptom-free. And she was interviewed by a Dutch newspaper that put out an article about her experience. Once again, I am completely oblivious. I'm over here in the States having nothing to do with this. A man named Gary in a remote village in New Zealand is having long COVID to the point where he has become totally disabled. He has such severe symptoms that he's experiencing aphasia. He can't even find words. Like, you guys have to understand that when your nervous system is severely dysregulated, it has the power to shut your body down completely. He is so stricken that he actually decides to live in a camper on his property because he can't even interact with his wife. Like, he so needs to even just not even have human interaction. His wife reads the newspaper article about Lika, and she comes to him and she says, "Will you just let me read this to you?" Because he can't even read. He can't focus. He can't speak on the phone. She reads it to him, and something wakes up in him. Now, Gary has never heard a podcast before. He is so completely, he's like a woodsman, and he loves to hike. He's in his 60s. He loves to hike and hunt and fish. And he's, oh, what's a podcast? He looks up my podcast and he finds this episode with Lika and he listens to it. First podcast he's ever heard in his life. He dedicates himself to the work. Same thing. Gets the Freedom from Chronic Pain course. Starts doing the JournalSpeak. And this is before I even had membership communities and places where I'm working with people. So he had no access to me. Does the work, heals himself completely. He's back to hiking, fishing. His entire life is better. And he writes me an email. And he tells me this story in an email. And I go, Gary, I need to bring you on my podcast. So I bring Gary on the podcast. And now at this point, Gary, who had been this guy with this little small life, has said he wants to change his life. He wants to help others. So he has now started to spread the word all over New Zealand and Australia. And he's helping people and he's calling people and he's starting this network of people. His son was like stricken with his own chronic things. His son did the work. His son is all better. His son is writing to me. And then I had him on the podcast. Thousands and thousands of people around the world have been helped by Gary. And I wrote both their stories in this book. Actually, they wrote their stories. All the stories in this book are written in their own words. And this is the incredible power of not only the self-healing that is possible with this work, but our global community and the connectedness of how we heal each other. And it blows my mind. I love it.
Oh, I love it so much. One of my favorite things that I think you also believe very much, I'm guessing, is that I like to focus on how we're all so similar. We're just actually just way more similar than we are different. And the way I coach with people, part of it is to try to uncover some of the unconscious stress. I'm using a different modality, which is why I'm excited to invite in some of this other work and share it. Also be part of sharing it as much as possible. But when you start to uncover those pieces, you realize that we are just humans with these same core emotions that just present different ways. They just present different ways.
100%.
And you can't tell someone that it's their problem, they have to come to it themselves. No one could have told you you were pissed because of the way your dad dealt with his own anger growing up. No one could have told you that. You had to figure that out on your own. You had to uncover it. You had to excavate it. So speaking of excavating, someone may fear, oh my gosh, I think this is common too. People want to avoid like the length, like failing, even though that's actually how you get to success is failing. And so in order to help someone start this type of work, what are a couple JournalSpeak prompts just to help people get started, especially if they're like feeling like they have a blank piece of paper in front of them with writer's block?
Yes. Well, as I said, I'm completely willing to answer your question, but I always answer it with a caveat, which is I really do think the first prescription must be knowledge. If somebody's listening to this and they're like, I want to JournalSpeak, you don't want to be disappointed or you don't want to be put off because you try to do this thing that you think you understand from listening to a podcast. I'm interviewed constantly. I've given so many different like talks and lectures and interviews. The first thing I always say is give yourself the gift of learning what I'm really talking about. That's why I wrote the book. Go to my website, go to NicoleSachs.com. So much free stuff, so much stuff where you can participate and make an investment in yourself, but do that first. I will give a JournalSpeak prompt because I will, and because I do think that they're powerful and they make you think, but I want people to know that this is actually something to learn. It would be like if I showed you a bicycle and you were like, that's so pretty and I'm going to go ride it. And maybe you could, but like maybe it would probably be best for someone to teach you how to do it first. So I have to say that. Yes, exactly. Exactly. Or drive a car. If a 7-year-old was like, I want to drive that. Okay, you could try. I don't know how that's going to go. So what I'll say is there are many JournalSpeak prompts. The book has pages of them. One that I love is, which was inspired by a Tara Brach meditation that I did once. What am I unwilling to feel? What am I unwilling to feel? These are bold questions. This takes willingness. This takes openness. This takes bravery and grit. And then I always start with, I am unwilling to feel blank, meaning like I write the whole sentence out because it's almost like I'm preparing myself to take this seriously. And then what I say about JournalSpeak is you start like a court reporter. You're not going to delve into the depth of human emotion right away. So you start by telling the story. I'm unwilling to feel how scary it is that one day my mother will die. Yesterday, I was on the phone with her and we just had such a delightful conversation and I can't imagine a world without her in it. And then just go. And maybe it's going to take you to 3rd grade where you love your mother, but she actually was really abusive to you. Or maybe it's going to take you to when you were 15 and you were the worst kid and you hurt her so badly and you're so ashamed of yourself that you can't even look at, who knows? I'm pulling stuff out of the air. But the point is, there are things in there, and once you invite them up, you can dance with them. And I want you to think of it as a dance because it's not a drill sergeant with a gun to your head. This is a beautiful dance with you and you, with the parts of you that have yet to be heard. We are grown-ups. We have the power to love and parent ourselves the way we weren't parented, to hold ourselves with compassion instead of criticism. Because the third facet of my work is patience and kindness for yourself. And I will say, I had no concept. I didn't know what self-compassion was. I would have said it's just some like light, stupid thing that who cares? Like for many years. And when I started realizing that bailing out emotional reservoir without some concept of a self-compassion practice is like bailing out a boat with a hole in the bottom. Like, how much work do you want to do? And the answer is, for me, as little as possible. So I work very hard at catching and releasing. Like, my self-criticism is not going to just stop because I decide. But I can have an intentional practice of noticing it like I do in my meditation, acknowledging it, not saying it's fake, like I know it's happening, and then releasing it. I see what's happening. I see whose voice that is. That's my father's voice, or that's the voice I created as a result of failures I perceive, or whatever. And I can say, that's not serving me. I acknowledge that it's there. I'm going to allow it to go. I'm going to be okay. Like, it's a practice. I teach that in the book as well. It's so important to know that. So really, that's one prompt. Another prompt that I love is what's renting the most real estate in my head today? What's taking up so much space? And then telling the story like a court reporter there. Oh my God. So yesterday my friend said this and I said it was okay, but it really wasn't okay for me. Like you just start writing it. And then I say journal speak is like putting a bunny in a freshly fallen snow. It's going to go left. It's going to go right. It's going to go back on itself. It's going to run forward. Like you might be in third grade and then you're in your future pre-grieving what's going to happen when your kids go to college. And then you're back in your first relationship where your boyfriend was abusive and blah, 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 blah. Let it go. Let it flow and then destroy it. I'm a really big proponent in destroying your journal speak because it's an exercise. That's why it's journal speak, not journaling. Because if you're free with no one watching to say the most inappropriate, the most self-indulgent, the most pathetic and needy things that you need to say, rip, delete, move on, watch. Just you watch how you start to free yourself, how you start to forgive yourself, how you start to forgive others. It's amazing.
Yeah, I love it. There's been so many beautiful punctuations in this conversation. So I will punctuate there and ask people, you mentioned NicoleSachs.com. Tell us all the places people can find you, the name of your podcast, and the name of this most recent book behind you in case you're listening and not viewing, that it's Mind Your Body.
Yes. So my website is NicoleSachs.com, NICOLE. Some people think I have an H in my name. Nicole Sachs. And the reason I say to go there first is because I think of our website as a hub. I think of it as like a center of a community where you can find anything you need. My partner, Lisa, and I created, the brand is called Your Breakawake. So it's also, you'll see if you go to NicoleSachs.com, it'll populate as yourbreakawake.com because sometimes you have to break free of old paradigms to wake up to everything that is available to you. There is so much there. I have membership communities where I work with people directly. I don't work one-on-one, but I work with the group. I'm teaching at the Omega Institute. I do that every year, the last week of June. So this year, our retreat is June 22nd through the 27th. So depending on when this airs, people might still be able to go to that, which is an incredible in-person 5-day retreat of healing beyond. I have several courses that are self-directed. So that means you don't have to show up to any community. Freedom from chronic pain, freedom from an anxious life. And I have a podcast called The Cure for Chronic Pain that's also linked in the website, totally free, hundreds of episodes. I'm active on my Instagram community at Nicole Sachs LCSW. I'm all over the place. Mind Your Body dropped on February 4th. It is the comprehensive guide of how to do this for yourself. If you only want to make the smallest investment and get the most bang for your buck, you can start there. Really, there's just so much there, and just explore it with a gentle curiosity. Maybe this can help me. That's what I want for people.
That's beautiful. I appreciate your work. I can't imagine the relief or what the emotion was for Dr. John Sarno to see that what he learned was continued and amplified through your work. And I know you work with his daughter in your other course. So I just think that is really beautiful of how do we take something and amplify it. So thank you so much for the work that you do. And thanks for coming on today.
Thank you. And I just want to say thank you for mentioning that about Dr. Sarno. You may be the first person who ever actually said that to me in an interview. And it really warms my heart because he worked for 50 years at the Rusk Center for Rehabilitation at NYU Medical Center. And oftentimes he was really ostracized because the collective consciousness was not ready for what he had to give. And it is my privilege. And yes, my partner, Lisa, and I partnered with Christina. So that's the final thing that I forgot to mention. If you're a practitioner and you're looking to bring this work into your school, your community, your practice, whether it be like an acupuncturist or a doctor or a nurse or a therapist, the Sarno Sachs solution is also linked to our website or at sarnosachs.com, where Christina wrote the training with us, and we certify you and we give 18.75 CEs. So it's a really great way to bring this to your community also. But thank you so much for having me.
These bones, will they just keep breaking?